Good evening. Welcome to the July 17th Village Board meeting. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
Of the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Trustee Bazemore.
Present.
Trustee Levin.
Present.
Trustee Herrera.
Present.
Trustee Quezada.
Present.
Mayor Garrity.
Present.
We'll begin tonight with the public hearing in the matter of the application by Ossining Lands LLC for a planned waterfront special permit pursuant to Village Code Section 270-23I and 270-53. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board on this public hearing?
Well, Corporation Counsel, do you want to give us a sort of a status update on where we are with this?
I can, Mayor. Thank you very much. On Thursday, I circulated to members of the board a proposed resolution with regard to the planned waterfront special permit. That was also provided to the applicant's counsel. I've also related to the members of the board two particular areas with that resolution that the applicant had issues. One related to the requirement that within 7 days from the approval date of the resolution, the Smith Robinson House, the landmark building, be secured. Initially, the applicant had requested 30 days to do that, and he then came back and offered to have the securing of the building done within 14 days from the date of the resolution. The other request by the applicant dealt with the payment of the $192,500, which was for the water relining. As the board will recall, that was a project that was undertaken by the village at the time of the prior approvals to this project. There was a prior water main relining agreement which indicated that that payment would be made by the applicant at the time the certificate of occupancy was issued. The applicant and I had conversations. Trustee Quezada was involved in these as well, and the agreement at that point had been that the $192,500 would be paid at the time of the application for the building permit, or the initial building permit. And in the proposed resolution, the building permit would be applied for 30 days after the demolition is completed. The applicant's representative and applicant's counsel subsequently contacted me and indicated that the applicant would not be able to make the payment at the time of the building permit submission, but rather would make the payment at the time of the building permit being issued. And the applicant explained that that was because of financing issues, and that the liquidity or the closing on anything would occur when the building permit is issued, and the funds would then be available to proceed with paying the village for the $192,500. I advised counsel, and as this board is aware, the building permit itself may not actually be issued for potentially up to 3 years. The way our code is written, the site plan has a 1-year period of time, and then the applicant may obtain an additional, 2 additional 1-year extensions from the planning board. So it's not mandatory the planning board gives it, but that possibility does exist. So I know that the applicant has indicated issues relating to financing, and that's why he wanted to change the time when payment was made. And in fairness to the applicant, I just want to say that what he has indicated is that, his understanding had been all along that it was to be at the time the permit was issued, but again, as I've communicated to this board, it was when the permit was applied for. The resolution that I did supply to everyone last week does lay out a fairly tight time schedule with regard, should this permit be granted, in terms of the need to provide the vacant building plan as required by Village Code Section 162, Article 8, the securing of the Smith-Robinson house, obtaining the demolition permit. And with regard to the demolition permit, it is my understanding that the documentation is all in. It has not yet been issued. The one thing that needs to be done, I think it's to be done this week, and it may actually have already been done, is the capping of the water lines by the village itself. And that I know it was to be done this week. The resolution also provides that no later than 30 days after the demolition is completed, the applicant would apply for a building permit, and further, that the permit is conditioned upon a periodic review by the Board of Trustees, and that a 6-month review is warranted, which would be close to the period of time with regard to the Zoning Board of Appeals review. And it also provides that if the applicant does not comply with the conditions noted above, the applicant shall appear before the Board of Trustees at its next scheduled meeting to explain the failure to comply with the conditions, and that the Board of Trustees reserves the right to revoke the planned waterfront special permit or to impose additional conditions. Finally, should the applicant sell or otherwise transfer its interest in the Hudson Step project, the purchaser or transferee shall be bound by the aforementioned conditions. So that's what was submitted. As I said, there were some revisions requested by the applicant. Late this afternoon, I spoke to the applicant again, who indicated that he would be amenable to giving the village essentially a lien on the property in the amount of $192,500, which is the amount that's owed, and that at the time of closing, the lien would be satisfied by paying it off. I'm not sure. Putting aside the fact as to whether the village itself is in a position to even do something like that, the point of the matter was to get the funds paid to the village on as expeditious a basis as we can, and I think that's what's provided for within the planned waterfront special permit as now exists before the board. But as I said, there was also the request to change the period of time with regard to Smith-Robinson from 7 to 14 days. What the applicant indicated is that time was needed to get his contractors on site in order to get that building secured. So that's the status right now, Mayor.
Yeah. Is there anyone who would like to speak?
Hi, Annie Klein. I'm an associate at Del Bello, Donnell and Weingarten, Wise and Whitaker. Just wanted to thank you, Stuart. That's a very detailed description of the discussions that the applicant and I have had with Stuart in the past couple of days. The resolution really does have a very tight timeline, and so with regards to the zoning board going back in 6 months, coming back for this in 6 months, it really tightens up our ability to extend and ask for extensions. And so setting forth that we have to secure and commence demolition within 30 days. Then after 30 days after the demolition, we have to get apply for the building permit. Really, as far as payment at issuance of building permit, I don't, think it will be 3 years. I really think that this time frame tightens it up and forces us to really get on project, which we're excited about. So, thank you so much.
Members of the board want to?
I do have a question. Are you going to be selling this project if we get all the approvals?
No.
You come to the mic, please.
Barnett Lieberman, principal of Ossining Land. Thank you. Thanks again, Council Kahani, for the summary and the recommendations that you made. The question is do I have an intention to sell after these approvals are issued? The answer is no. No intention to sell. Further questions? I want to address, if I may, the reason for the request to have the payment made at the issuance of the permit, at the first permit, if it becomes an issue of partial permits. Originally, it was scheduled for the entire amount to be paid at the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy. And there have been many delays, and we understand that the village has already spent the funds, and we understand an obligation to pay them quicker. But if we have to pay it at the application, we may not be able to. It's not a matter of not wanting to, but it's a matter of not having the liquidity to do that at that point. We'll be spending considerable money until we get to the closing. The closing takes place, one of the elements of the closing is the permit. You need to have the construction permit. So at that point, at the closing, title company will ensure that the village is paid when we have the mortgage closing and begin construction. Not the demolition, when we begin construction of the project. So it's for that reason that we don't want to agree now to something that we may not be able to do. So that's why we offer to give at the point of application, give the village a lien on the property so that any financing or any sale at any point, this village would have to be paid that amount of money. It's not a matter of a requirement of the agreement. If there's a lien on the property, if they want to turn it into a parking lot, they would have to get an insured title, they'd have to pay off that lien if the worst things were to happen. So that's the assurance we wanted to offer in lieu of having to come up with the payment at that point.
Thank you.
Have any questions on that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Lieberman. I do have a couple of questions for Corporation Counsel.
Yes, Mayor.
So most of the approvals related to this proposed development not come to the village board. Most of them go to the land use boards, primarily to the planning board and some to the zoning board of appeals, and also the HPC, the Historic Preservation Commission, was involved initially, and then I think they're the one that hasn't expired.
That would be correct. Their
certificate of appropriateness. Piece that we're looking at right now that we're talking about adding conditions to, and exactly what the conditions are is the topic of discussion that we're in front of us tonight.
Yes.
The special waterfront permit it's a density bonus, right?
Correct.
So if this weren't approved, what would that mean for the application?
They would go back to the permitted density under the zoning tables. I don't have it in front of me, but it would be, they get,
Instead of 189, it might be 180 or 169.
well, I think it'd be significantly below, because I forget what the breakdown is. I think with the maximum density, this may be one of those zones you can get perhaps, let's say you get 30 with the density, but without it, you may only get 20 units per acre. It's something, so the number, there would be a difference in
It would
numbers.
be like a third less, is what you're saying.
So it would be fewer units.
It's substantial.
Which could change, which would also then change the site plan.
Right. Yes. So they would have to start over completely.
They'd have to go, well, they'd at least have to go back to the planning board to revise a site plan. Whether it would require additional variances is unclear, but it would change their total number. That's correct.
Okay. So this is more important than it sounds. Alrighty. Other concerns, questions? Some people know how they're voting. I imagine some people knew how they were voting when they walked in here today, regardless of the a little bit here, a little bit there, or when the 192.5 comes due.
Did you, I'm sorry, did you update in the work session for the record about the affordable housing issue? That in the work session, was that discussed?
Yes, it was.
Manager Tori did an update, yeah.
I mean, I was there, because there's so many discussions and this has been going on for so long, I don't remember what the public did hear and didn't hear, because that was one of my concerns is on that issue.
So the public hearing is still open. Before we vote on anything, no matter what it says, we would have to close the public hearing, and then we would have the opportunity to vote on this either up or down. And the proposal that you sent to us last Thursday, I don't know if you has it as secured in 7 days, right?
It still says 7 because
Okay.
that was the
Yes.
14-day suggestion only
Right.
came yesterday, so.
They'll
haven't
secure it in 7 days. The demolition will commence within 30 days. And then upon application, they will pay the $192,005 for the water main relining that's already been completed. And the proposals that have come since then are a little different. Help me understand, you know, I'm aware when a big development, when they pull their permits and then they make a big payment, like for the, in lieu of parkland funds, for example,
Right.
there's some negotiated amount that it can be quite significant if it's
Yes.
a large building. At what point in the process is that paid? Is the time of, is pulling the permit making the application?
I have to go back and look at the site plan in terms of the in lieu of parkland payment here as to when it has to be made. I don't have.
And
that
I
in front
don't
of
know
me.
if it's the same thing, and I don't know if there's a standard practice. I'm just trying to understand because we don't usually get this deep into the weeds.
No, I'm not. I don't think it comes at the stage of the building permit with regard to the in lieu of parklands. The big fee that they will have to pay, which is based upon the cost of the project, is for the building permit itself, because that's calculated in terms of what the total anticipated cost of the project is.
And that's paid at the time of application?
Yes.
So this would be in addition to that. So whatever
Yes.
that payment is, which is a six-figure sum, I take it, for this size
Given what the
development?
size of the project is, yeah.
Okay, so that's a six-figure sum, so this would be 192.5 on top of that. So there's got to be some access to funding at that stage anyway.
Yes, but and the way on previously, the way this particular project would happen was they did an application, they did 2 applications, short for building permit. One was for the renovation of
Smith
Smith
Robinson.
Robinson House. That was a building permit. Number one. Then they made a second application for the rest of the permit.
Correct.
So amount of money for building permit, that is big as the second building.
Oh, so it's
Unless they combine both of them, make a one whole.
And the way this is drafted is that upon
Building
application of whatever is the first building permit, even if it's a smaller amount, even if it's
Correct.
just a Smith Robinson.
Because you have the demo permit, one. Construction and restoration.
Before we formally cast a vote, I just like to have some sense of where this is going to go and if there's a way that the board can vote on some version of this. Or if no ability for us to see our way to this.
Look, for me, a tipping point was the lack of sincere negotiation, and I don't mean sincere and emotional, on the affordable housing issue. It is, it's not okay. The best that we get here is less than what it should have been years ago. Forget our new level that we've agreed to. We've changed of some of the equation. The amount offered to buy out of the affordable housing is, in my mind, really low, and I'm afraid it sets a precedent for others. And in my opinion, during a boom economy of a number of years now, with the real estate market being where it is, we're not in a recessionary cycle like we were years ago, and we were helping developers sort of get the hump in their finances because it was a difficult time and it was difficult for this community, for the development. You know, it isn't that case any longer, and we've had so much effort put on the village's side to come through, and I'm just not in support. Point if you're asking and pushing me to give an opinion, I find it really difficult on a number of different levels. It adds to a list of not being a good neighbor in the community, to not doing things until hands are forced, and taking so long to get things done. And it's just, I probably could see that through all of that, but I'm really struggling. And I even said to one other trustee here till like minutes ago, frankly, it's not okay, the offer of table affordable housing buyout. It's not enough. It's not right. It's not helping the community in any way.
No, but I just want to
Well, there
remind.
is no buyout on the table now.
Right. They're
The-
just,
the
they're just doing what is the legal
presentation is
minimum.
It's going to stay at the 80% because we discussed the money they, I think was 2.2.
2.2
was not,
million.
so
Right.
that's not even on the table.
Yeah, so all we're left with is just the legal minimum, which is all that's ever been in any
Right.
of the site plans proposed.
Much as frustrated project has been my end, it's one of the minor changes that I would like to propose the rest of the board, if anything. The resolution will be, instead of having the 6 months, 3 months.
And
You're
item
You're talking
G,
about the review period?
Which item are you
Review
talking
period.
about?
6 months that we give them, they allowing the
Yeah.
6 months
Oh.
special permit, pretty much, instead of 6 months, we give them 3 months. I want to be less than what the zoning board is.
letter G.
Because letter G now has the planned waterfront special permit shall be conditioned upon a periodic review by the board. Board of Trustees believes this draft had a 6-month review of the permit as warranted, and the permit itself expires 18 months from the date of approval, unless a building permit has been issued. But so that's the provision you're talking about, from the 6 months to 3 months.
Correct.
So let me just understand how this theoretically could play out, although I'm not so sure that this is even this point. If we were to vote on the proposal that you sent last Thursday with the one modification that was made, suggested just now, where we review it in 3 months rather than 6 months, that's not at all what the applicant is now suggesting that they can
Right.
make happen. If we move forward with closing the public hearing, passing it with where we thought we were last week, but with a 3-month review rather than a 6-month review, and it's not what the applicant wants, but we would be approving the special permit.
You would be.
So then it would be up to them if they could fulfill those standards, that level of payment.
Those conditions would have to be met. That is correct.
And if they were not, then
They would return back to this board at the next meeting after they miss a deadline, and the board would have the option to revoke the permit or impose additional conditions.
Okay with that.
think
Yeah, I'm
you go.
getting that clear message from both sides of the table here.
I don't think anybody's happy about any of the options.
No,
So
I-
it's not how we would like this to go at all, because we want to have developments that work well for our community, and we want to be able to have constructive relationships with developers that feel good about it, are going to benefit us. And right now, that's not how this is unfolding.
Right.
Keep in mind that we've been in this position for the past several years. We're back and forth with the developer has come back here, or this board has allowed them extensions over extensions over extensions, and nothing really has happened. So they're eager to get their permits, they're eager to do the work. A couple months back, they came in and said that they have the money, that they have the funds back, and they said, we don't have the money to get the finances. So to me, I'm given an opportunity to get all this stuff done. Is 3 months not enough? Then 3 months, anything goes through. Not, and you will go back to the planning board.
And Persian Council Khan, am I understanding? They could actually be before us sooner than 3 months if they've missed a deadline, if they haven't secured the building in 7 days, if they haven't done the demolition in 30 days.
That's correct.
But we don't need the developer's agreement to this because we vote on it. If it doesn't suit them, that's on them. Is
The
that correct?
conditions that you're imposing is part of a permit, that's correct.
So I'd like to say that this has been a 10-year ordeal. I think we have different perspectives here. One of the things, definitely even before I got on the board, is I can think of a community member right now who says that Ossining seems to suffer from low self-esteem. That basically, you know, particularly when it comes to development, we just grovel at any chance to do something because we want to just do something. You know, when we look around at our neighboring communities, it seems like everything is happening. Now let's get something done. Now, as we talk about the DWRC, you know, the vacant parcels that the village owns, it clearly is a desire in this community just to do something. However, with respects to Hudson Step, I don't want to just do something. You know, to go back and forth for 10 years, you either have the money or you don't have the money. To sit up here and ask the gentleman, do you have any plans of selling it? I'm gonna be quite frank. Your word has no weight to me because one, you weren't under oath. You know, even in our conversations in the meeting, it was a desire to have this done by the 17th. I think the village has actually been very generous in any type of negotiation. At some point, somewhere, you have to know when to fold them. One of the things that outside of the affordable housing is that community members came here and talked about parking, talked about the quality of life. I'm still getting emails about cones blocking 2 parking spaces, right? We have the ability to determine whether or not this project happens or not. And we have the ability to determine whether it's the right fit for right now. Now, I understand the concept of, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, we're good to developers. We don't want developers to go, you know, to other developers and say, you know, Ossining doesn't play fair. In this case, the village has played more than fair. So I'm not interested in doing 3 months, doing 6 months. Guy comes and tells you that he needs time and, hey, you know what, let's go for the lien because the financing may not work out. And if at best, you know, that doesn't happen and someone wants to build a parking lot, you know, you can at least get your $192,000. I don't think it's the right fit. And I don't think he's going to build anything. I don't have a crystal ball. But I think given where we're at in the market, this is not Harbor Square. Not, you know, we have to give out a pilot because we need something to happen. I think we can wait on this one. I will say this with respects to the 3 months, nah.
Stuart, just, I mean, we see where this is going. I just need to be clear. Something. I want to make this not only tight. I don't think I can prevent anybody from selling, not I personally, but they sell it or turn it over. Are you having a hard time hearing me? Sorry. I want to understand what we can do on the worst. Quantel, I think, if I were a betting person, I would be betting. Quantel is not exactly wrong here. I mean, I think that he's got a great point about it. The question is whether we want to give this developer one more shot and what the ramifications are when he falls through and doesn't come through for this village. What can we do and how do we word it in a way that we can take immediate action and not put yet another board through this ridiculousness? So what is, like, can I ask you for the right wording? I mean, I think that Manny is trying to tighten it so that when a mark doesn't get hit, we're done with this.
Well,
There's no more time left.
It provides in here that if he misses a date, he comes back, you can revoke the permit.
And revoking the permit means
He
that
doesn't have his density.
the same thing that we'd be voting on if we voted no today.
Correct.
Okay.
Stuart, can you remind me of the previous agreement about the $192,000?
It was to be paid to Trustee Bazemore at the time of the certificate of occupancy. That was part of the agreement that was entered into back when the initial approvals were received back in 2014, 2015.
And then was there another agreement after that?
No. Essentially, since nothing happened from their end, nothing's occurred. The only thing that happened in the interim is we did the work, obviously, but there was no interim agreement, or there's been no subsequent water main relining agreement since that time.
Andy, did you meet with him to discuss the $192,000?
Correct.
What was said at that meeting?
That was pretty much, that's the proposed part of the language that we have now, that they need to pay that money at the time that they issue a permit.
Did he agree to that at the time?
Yes, he did.
And now it's different, correct?
Correct. Yes, he's proposing something
Something
different.
different.
Right, but not in the resolution.
Okay.
So, a decade, even before a lot of us were all on the board together, it's not new for this conversation to have changed so much, and the proposals to have changed so much. I mean, even look how much has changed in 1 month in conversations just with this board alone. You have been a bad neighbor. You are still a bad neighbor. You're not addressing the affordable housing needs, especially a community that's made it very loud and clear and proven statistically and through data that who we are and what we're trying to address and who we're trying to retain. You have heard feedback as far as quality of life issues, and so far, none of those have been addressed or met. So you made the decision not to be a good fit for me or the village already. I agree with Trustee Bazemore that I think the village is being positioned in a way where us waiting would hurt us at this time. You know, that particular intersection has great potential, great challenges, and a lot is happening there already. So we have to really look at that a bit further if we can, and as we are. I thank you for your time. I thank the staff for all your staff time in the village, taxpayer funded roles that went into this project over and over and over again. And I thank you for that.
Well, I think I'll wait one more time and then vote them out if they mess this up again.
So pass it with the,
So let's close the meeting and, you know, with the changes. I need a really tight noose here. So.
We can
be
close the
very
public
blunt.
hearing.
Yeah,
sure.
we
yeah,
can
look,
close it.
everybody agrees we
We
close the
all
public
agree to
hearing?
close the
Ah,
public hearing.
Thank goodness, all right.
Okay. That we all agree on.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so now, the resolution that would come up for a vote would be what was sent to us last Thursday with a couple of modifications, which were, Stuart, where are you at?
Well, the only modification requested by the board was from Trustee Kazada just before, was with regard to the 3 months.
3 months instead of
to
6
go
months.
instead of 6 months. The applicant, as I mentioned, had 2 requests. One was to go from 7 to 14 days with regard to securing Smith Robinson. And the other was with regard to the payment of the $192,500.
Well, I have to say, the 7 to 14 days, I see that as negligible. I could give on that because 14 days from now is a 5th Wednesday anyway, so be back the week after that.
Yeah, I mean,
If
for
you
us,
hadn't
it
come
makes
through
no
it.
difference.
Yeah, so I'm fine with going from 7 to 14. That's negligible. If that makes a difference and actually getting it secured, I'd love to see it secured. That's really important for the safety of our community. I don't think another 7 days is
The other piece
the
is-
difference.
And so the second one is the 192.
That would be correct.
That'll be a no.
I don't know what that means.
You want to keep the 192.5 as it was written in
Oh,
the
I see.
Part of the resolution.
the resolution that we received on Thursday.
Okay.
Means at the time of application, which is different than what was requested since then.
Correct.
And then when we're back here for our next legislative session, their first deadline would have passed. So we'll see if the building has been secured. And then when we are back here 30 days from now, so that would be I guess on the 21st of August, we'll see if the demolition is underway. And if it's not, then that will be another deadline that they will have either.
Right.
Who are you asking?
I'm asking staff if my understanding of what this is
That's-
accurate, so that we
yes,
know if we
'cause-
pass this, what it
Because
means.
everything will be dated from the date of approval of the resolution.
Would be
That's when the
tonight if
clock-
we approve
That's
it.
when the clock would start.
Okay.
Do you want me to read the resolution?
So wait, $192,000. Where's the board at with?
Oh, no, there was no lien,
Okay.
due
So-
upon of application,
Okay.
as it was drafted on
Okay, as it
Thursday.
was,
Yeah,
Building permit.
He told you.
they want that, but
Yes.
we're not agreeing to that. That's a little bit of the change here. Or maybe I should say we're not changing that.
It's actually the non-change.
We're not
yeah.
changing it. We're not agreeing to the term.
Okay, it's a lengthy resolution. Do we want to have it read into the record?
I can do so, yes, because it's not actually in our agenda. So
Okay.
I didn't know if there'd be changes tonight, so I thought I'd do it this
The only
way.
change
Okay.
then is 6 to 3 months. Okay.
Those
No,
two
and the
things.
14
Well, and the
And the
first-
14 days.
Of
Oh,
course,
yeah,
right.
yeah, I forgot.
The
That
rest
was
is
my
the same.
suggestion.
Keep the 7 days.
No,
I'm okay with
14
that.
days. Let's make sure that happens. That's important. I want that to happen. If
Okay.
7 more days makes a difference, let's do it.
Resolution calling for approval of request for planned waterfront special permit for the Hudson Step Development. Whereas at a duly convened public meeting on January 16, 2019, the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining acknowledged receipt of an application from Ossining Land LLC, applicant, concerning property located at 34 State Street, Village of Ossining, New York, having the tax designation of Section 97.07, Block 2, Lots 17, 19, 21, and 68 for the project known as Hudson Step. And whereas by submission of said application to the village board, the applicant sought approval for a planned waterfront special permit as referenced in sections 270-23I and 270-53 of the Code of the Village of Ossining, and the applicant filed an application for site development plan approval from the planning board as required by section 270-54A of the village code. And whereas by resolution dated January 16, 2019, the board referred the matter to the planning board in accordance with the requirements of section 270-54A of the village code for a recommendation concerning the planned waterfront special permit. And whereas by resolution dated April 23, 2019, the planning board recommended to the Board of Trustees that the application for a planned waterfront special permit be granted. And whereas pursuant to section 239 of the New York State General Municipal Law, the application was also referred to the Westchester County Planning Board for their review and comments. And whereas a duly advertised public hearing was conducted by the village board on May 15, 2019, June 5, 2019, June 19, 2019, and July 17, 2019, at which time all those wishing to be heard were given the opportunity to address the Board of Trustees, and upon motion the public hearing was closed on July 17, 2019. And whereas the village board engaged in deliberations concerning the request by the applicant and determined that there were no impediments to approving said planned waterfront special permit subject to conditions. And whereas pursuant to section 270-54C, the village board in approving any special permit thereunder shall require conformance to any supplementary requirements applying to such uses generally, and may establish such other conditions or limitations upon the use or characteristics of the use which are reasonably related to the public health, safety, and general welfare, as may be necessary to carry out the intent of this chapter. And whereas pursuant to section 270-54G, the grant of special permits for the uses indicated may be conditioned on periodic renewal, which renewal shall be granted if following application, public notice, and hearing, and may be withheld upon determination that conditions as may have been identified in the original grant requiring that the use of be of temporary duration now necessitates cessation of such use or imposition of additional or supplemental safeguards or conditions that the original conditions as may have been prescribed for such permit have not been or are not being complied with wholly or in part. Notices of violation shall be prima facie evidence of lack of conformity to such standards or conditions. Now therefore be it resolved as follows. Number 1, the village board hereby acknowledges and concurs with the SECRA findings dated October 28, 2014, which findings were reaffirmed by the planning board on March 26, 2019, and hereby approves the applicant's request for a planned waterfront special permit for the project known as Hudson Step on property located at 34 State Street, having the tax designation of section 97.07, block 2, lots 17, 19, 21, and 68, subject to the following conditions. A, no later than 30 days from the date of approval of this resolution, the applicant shall submit a vacant building plan which must meet the approval of the building inspector pursuant to section 162-54C. Such vacant building plan must contain, at a minimum, the information required by section 162-54C 1 and 3. For the properties to be demolished, a demolition plan, quote, under permit application filed with the building department must be provided along with an affidavit from the owner and a performance guarantee. For the Smith Robinson House, which is to be restored, a rehabilitation plan and performance guarantee ought to be provided as noted in section 162-54C3. As noted in the aforementioned section, any repairs, improvements, or alterations to the property must comply with any applicable zoning, housing, historic preservation, or building codes, and must be secured in accordance with the village code during the rehabilitation or until a new certificate of occupancy or certificate of completion has been issued. B, no later than 14 days from the date of approval of this resolution, the applicant shall secure the Smith Robinson House pursuant to section 162-54. The applicant shall provide to the building department a letter with photographs demonstrating compliance with this condition. C, no later than 30 days from the date of approval of this resolution, the applicant shall secure a demolition permit and commence demolition in accord with the demolition plan submitted to the building department. The applicant shall provide to the building department monthly reports with photographs detailing the progress of the demolition. To the extent that demolition involves any portion of the Smith Robinson House, such monthly reports and photographs shall be provided to the Historic Preservation Commission. The applicant is reminded that pursuant to section 270-43M, the demolition permit shall expire 6 months from the date of issuance. Although the permit may be renewed upon application to the building department, the applicant is further reminded that renewal will not be granted if the permit has been revoked or suspended at the time of the renewal request. D, no later than 30 days after the demolition is completed, the applicant shall apply for a building permit. It is understood that the applicant must have the plans reviewed by the International Code Council in accord with comments provided by the ICC. Any expenses for the ICC review shall be the responsibility of the applicant. E, the applicant shall pay to the village the previously agreed upon sum of $192,500 for the water main relining work that was completed by the village. Such payment shall be made when the applicant applies for the building permit for the project. If more than one building permit is required, the payment shall be made when the applicant files for the first building permit. F, the applicant shall comply with all conditions detailed in the resolutions of the Planning Board and Zoning Board of Appeals and the certificates of appropriateness of the Historic Preservation Commission. G, this planned waterfront special permit shall be conditioned upon periodic review by the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees believes that a 3-month review of the permit is warranted. The applicant shall comply with section 270-54G. Additionally, pursuant to section 270-54F, this special permit shall expire no later than 18 months from the date of approval of this resolution unless a building permit has been issued for the special permit use. H, if the applicant does not comply with the conditions noted above, the applicant shall appear before the Board of Trustees at its next scheduled meeting to explain the failure to comply with the conditions. The Board of Trustees reserves the right to revoke the planned waterfront special permit or impose additional conditions. I, should the applicant sell or otherwise transfer its interest in the Hudson Step project, the purchaser or transferee shall be bound by the aforementioned conditions. Number 2, the decision of the village board shall be filed in the office of the village clerk and a copy mailed to the applicant. Do I have a motion?
Sir, quick question before the motion
Sure.
goes through. When was the secret done?
The original secret was done in 2014, and those findings were reaffirmed on March 26, 2019.
How long did it take for the secret to be reaffirmed by the planning board?
They had 4 or 5 meetings at least.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further comments from the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
Okay, can we do that again, please? And do it in the order that you asked?
The roll call, you mean?
Aye.
I do.
Not a roll
No, why
call.
don't we do it?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Very.
No, 2 nays.
Manny,
And
no, you ain't forced, Manny.
we can do this.
You can make the right decision.
Aye.
Oh, man.
Okay. All right. So,
I will see you in 3 months, maybe less.
so that was 3 ayes and 2
2
nays.
days. Thank you.
Clear on that?
Yeah.
All righty.
No, you don't need to.
Thank you. I hope to earn the hope to earn the trust you've voted for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman. All righty.
Mayors and trustees announcements?
Anyone have announcements this evening?
Yes, hi everyone. So some of you are here today or watching regarding a request that myself and Trustee Bazemore have made to the board for the police department. Just for you guys to know how the meeting works, that request and discussion will be held during new business of this meeting. And then we'll go from there. If you're in the public, you're invited to speak during public comment following it tonight. Thank you.
Any other?
In Spanish, I'm sorry. Para lo que están viendo en la televisión o por el internet o en el meeting que está aquí, yo como concejal y también mi otro concejal, Concejal Bazemore, estamos proponiendo que la policía de Ossining no colabore con ICE cuando ellos vengan a la comunidad con sus carros o con los oficiales que tenemos de policía de Ossining. Esa conversación la vamos a hacer durante la parte de negocio nuevo en la agenda y cuando esa parte se acabe, el público va a tener una oportunidad para hablar. Thank you.
I just want to clarify something, and I'm going to do it in Spanish. Para clarificar un poco en el comentario que hizo mi compañero, no es necesariamente que la policía está colaborando con ICE. Esos van a escuchar ustedes más luego la conversación exactamente cuál es el trabajo de la policía de Ossining, pero ellos en ninguna manera, ni una forma colaboran con la agencia de ICE. Quiero que esté eso bien claro para las personas que están aquí o las personas que están mirando. What I said was part of the translation that Omar had mentioned is that our police department does collaborate with ICE.
By escorting.
I said, but that's not the interpretation that I was made in Spanish. So I just wanted to make sure that it's clarified.
I said cuando ellos visitan el pueblo.
Okay.
Can I
But we
say
can discuss that
something?
later in the
Well,
business.
I appreciate all of this. Unless somebody gets me an interpreter from Spanish to English, this is not fair to someone like me. I don't know what either of you are saying, and I appreciate it. But in the same way that we get interpreters from English to Spanish when people request it in advance and we make every effort, I'm now saying on the record that if you guys are going to speak in Spanish, I want an interpreter in this room so that I understand what's being said. Because honestly, I don't know what either of you are saying, and with all due respect, I think I have a right to know exactly what you're saying, not what you're each interpreting that the other one is saying. It's becoming like unfair to me because I can't understand what you're saying, and there's no interpreter in the room for me.
I agree, but duly noted, and I do feel confident in the future that we're going to go into language access, but just as you feel uncomfortable, as I would too, there are other people who feel uncomfortable as well that don't understand. So it's just an issue that we have in
If they ask for
other.
an interpreter in advance, we make every effort. If you're going to say things in Spanish for both of you,
Not just
tell
Spanish,
me in
though, I'm saying.
advance, and I will ask for an interpreter.
But until we do interpreters, I'm not going to stop translating, all due respect.
That's fine. And then you two can argue about what you're each saying. So, can I ask a question about something?
Please.
You refer to a letter that you sent. Is it exactly the same letter that you sent, I assume, to the whole BOT, or is it a different letter? You sent a letter about this issue to the BOT. I don't know. Is that a letter that you sent out to the public, or that was a different
No,
letter?
that was just the email. I was
Okay,
talking about
I
the
just-
posting about today's discussion.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
No, that was just for my own clarification. I didn't know.
No, sure.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Any other announcements?
Anybody else?
Okay, well, I have a few announcements. First, I wanted to let folks know, update folks about a meeting that took place. It was actually at the Operations Center because that's where we had a room large enough. We were contacted by Senator Schumer's office. Ossining was identified as a community that might benefit from some extra support from the U.S. Census so that we can have a complete count of our residents. We had a visit from representatives from the regional office for the U.S. Census, and present were representatives from every level of government that represents Ossining, community leaders, the school district, the library. It was a really good step in the direction of establishing a complete count committee. I'm grateful to everyone who has attended, and the next step will be us reaching out. In fact, the census has back out to us to help us move forward with establishing the complete count committee. A lot of what they provided us was information about the timeline for how the census will roll out. And they also provided us with a website, which I believe is like uscensus.gov/jobs. It's something very generic like that. So if you search on the US Census website and look for jobs, they are, you can right now start applying for jobs to work as a census worker. They have a handful of people now. They're going to be ramping up. So now is a good time to get your application in. With the understanding, right now they can hire citizens. They have requested waivers for residents who are here in the country. And there was some discussion about the benefit of having folks who are indeed immigrants who would be part of the census staff. This year's census will be quite different from how it's been in the past because there will be 3 contacts that 3 outreaches to each household from the census in an effort to get folks to respond either online or by phone before you ever have somebody who up in person. If you aren't familiar with the long list of reasons why the census count being accurate is important, there's one recent one that anybody who's thinking about school funding and your local tax burden is keenly aware of. However you feel about sales tax, that sales tax 1% increase, how our sales tax is distributed in Westchester County to villages like us is based entirely on the 2010 U.S. Census. We know the 2010 census wasn't accurate in 2010, and it's way less accurate as a reflection of the portion of Westchester residents that live in Ossining. So we are getting less than our fair share of sales taxes in Westchester, and that is just one tiny example of why the census being an accurate count is important. The biggest one foundationally for our democracy is so that we can be accurately represented in Congress. So there are, for a long list of reasons, it is an incredibly important undertaking, and it's also an incredibly challenging one. So it's going to take need all hands on deck, and I know Trustee Herrera and others are very aware of what's going on, and we are really working to come together to have an effective process that gives us a complete count. Also, I wanted to put my documentary discussion series hat on for a moment. Thursday evening, the 18th, tomorrow, please join us at the Ossining Public Library at 6:30. The Ossining Documentary and Discussion Series will be screening the film The Best Democracy That Money Can Buy. So anyone who is concerned about the impact of big money, corporate money, in what is happening to our country and the decision-making by our elected officials, particularly at the national level, please join us. It is free to the public, 6:30. At the library. For more information, go to ossiningdocumentaries.org, and the panel discussion should be a really good one and includes one of our representative from a neighboring community from the Peekskill Common Council, who is also a candidate for the County Legislative District 1, that is Colin Smith. He's one of our panelists, as well as Ezzy Aris, who is a journalist who investigates local municipal government, and Kat Bresler, who is a recent candidate for White Plains City Council. So it's going to be a terrific film and an interesting conversation. I hope you join us on Thursday. And before I stop talking, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge one of our familiar face here in the room. Deputy Clerk Anne-Marie Rocco has been with the village for about a decade.
Yeah, about 10 years.
And I am sad for Ossining, but very happy for her to announce, is this your last meeting with us? So this is going to be her last meeting representing the village and serving us in this role, and she's moving on to a really exciting role where she will be the clerk in another municipality in Westchester.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, well, thank you for
Thank
all
you.
of your dedication to us. Really enjoyed the opportunity to work.
Are we allowed
Best of
to
luck.
ask where, or is that still
You can announce it.
I'll be village clerk in Ardsley.
not as good of a place as ours?
Well,
but-
there's no
but
comparison,
still-
of course.
Still lovely. Oh, that's good. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's great. Did you want to mention the voting? The pre-registration?
Sure.
No, I thought you were going to do it. I didn't.
Oh, no, I hadn't planned to.
All right, I just want to take a quick moment actually that thank our police department, like the schools, because over the summer, they're going to be doing different events and different activities. I missed it, but there was a block party down
Oh,
the
yeah.
street in James. I want to thank our police department and our school to organize this. There are different activities that are through the summer.
The next one's next Wednesday.
I want to say thank you to all of them that were part of this. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there, but I saw the pictures and I spoke to people. Enjoyed it very much, but that was.
What's going on with the? Maybe it's a
Okay, let me
microphone.
try this again. Did you hear me?
You can hear us, but they can't?
So I was what I was saying before is I want to. Can you hear me now? Any better?
Move the mic
All
up
right.
a little closer, maybe?
I am.
Oh.
I just want to say thank you to the police department, the school system for what they did and what they're doing over the summer for our community. They had a block party last Wednesday on James Street, and I think there's different activities. I'm going to have obviously the chief give the details of that, but I want to say thank you for everything and everybody that was part of this event. So thank you.
It was a great event, and I look forward to stopping by Yale before next week's meeting. We're good? Madam
So,
Clerk.
so we'll move into administrative reports. Village Manager Karen DeTore.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I had a wonderful opportunity on Monday night to be at the jazz concert down at Henry Gordine Park, and I was able to meet with residents as well as some people visiting the area, and it was really a wonderful show, wonderful evening, wonderful weather with the Ronnie Ben-Hur Quartet and Austin's own Alexis Cole as the guest vocalist. So that was a very nice opportunity that I had as village manager. Last Friday, I attended the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Development Council's annual meeting with Town Supervisor Dana Levenberg. It's their annual meeting. The Mid-Hudson counties get together to discuss different initiatives that they have, funding opportunities that are given out through the council, and it's a great opportunity to see what other municipalities are doing, what's happening in the region, and it's a good networking and learning experience. As an offshoot of that, we are going to be, we're just nearly completing our consolidated funding applications for funding through the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Development Council. We have 2 resolutions tonight that will be reviewing, one for the remediation of 200 Main Street and another grant proposal for a parking planning and feasibility study. We have a third grant that we're working on for the a roof at the water treatment plant, but we're working through some details that on that, and we will not have that ready for a resolution tonight, but hopefully we will by the due date, which is next week. And that's it. So, thank you.
Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Mayor, members of the board, Planning Board meets next Tuesday night. The agenda is online with all the links to all the documents that have been submitted in connection with all those files. So if anyone is interested, please feel free to go through that. If you check on any of our land use boards now, their agendas are online, and any documents that are submitted in connection with applications, be that HPC, Zoning Board of Appeals, or Environmental Advisory Council, in addition to Planning Board, are all online. So they can all be viewed at any point if you wish to do so. Last week during the work session, we had some discussion with regard to proposed changes to the electrical standards in the village. The building inspector will be here next week to go over that. In addition, we'll have also some discussions next week with regard to proposed changes relating to our plumbing standards, because we think that the electrical and plumbing should probably both be in line. Thank you, Trustee Quezada. We also will have some discussion, hopefully, with regard to issues regarding how do you notice to individuals involving land use board applications, which I know has been an issue as to just mailing versus signage and things like that. So if folks are interested in those topics, that will be something that will be discussed next week. But certainly with regard to electrical standards, many of the questions that the board raised last week, the building inspector will be here and we can go over them at that time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
You.
Police Chief Kevin Sylvester.
Good evening. We did in fact have our first block party of the summer last Wednesday that was on James Street. Those events are going to be every couple of weeks throughout the summer. We'll be advertising them as we go so people make sure they know where to go. Our next block party is going to be on Yale Avenue next Wednesday from 5 to 7-ish. We had a few hundred people on James Street last week, so we found that we may be extending these parties a little bit longer. But 400 hamburgers, 300 hot dogs, and 5,200 pounds of produce later. I think everybody left full and well equipped. We handed out books. We had Peter Kelly from Restaurants X2O and Xavier's, one of my favorite places. We had the Feeding Westchester. We had the Ossining School District. We had all kinds of organizations there. So it's a great program. Everything's totally free. We just want people to come out and check out the things we're doing, get to know your police department. It's a great way to build relationships, build trust. You know, these are great opportunities for people to just engage with their community. Really good chance for kids to go out and see their teachers in sort of an informal setting. That looked like a really fun thing to be going on. Tomorrow night we have Cops and Kids Sports. This is the makeup from last week. That flyer should be up on Facebook now. They'll be at Vets Park from 6 to 8 tomorrow night. So Cops and Kids Sports tomorrow is going to be soccer. The big question we get for that one is, what are the ages? We try our best to work with everybody, so everything from the big kids to the little kids. Somehow it works out. I'm not really sure how, but we make it happen. So that's what we got going on for now, and as the parties come down, we'll keep announcing those dates.
Organization announcements. Oh,
Not seeing
here?
anyone.
Okay, so we'll move into board resolutions. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board on any of the resolutions this evening? Okay, so we'll move into board resolutions. Approval of minutes, June 26, 2019. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the minutes of the June 26, 2019 special meeting as presented. Do I have a motion?
No move.
Second.
Is this the one you were at?
Oh.
Were you-
And it's June 26th?
June 26th, you were
No,
not
that's
there.
when I wasn't.
So
I'm
can you have somebody
sorry.
else second? I don't know what the
Yeah, I
second
abstain.
was.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed?
Yeah, I have to abstain. Thank you.
Those were 2 abstentions.
Two abstentions. Letter B, approval of minutes July 2nd, 2019. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the minutes of the July 2nd, 2019 regular meeting as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Abstain.
Letter C, approval of voucher detail report dated July 17, 2019. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the voucher detail report dated July 17, 2019 in the amount of $238,151.66. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board?
Yes. Every 2 weeks, we get the chance to review the voucher details, and there's additional information in there. There's questions sometimes in regards to how we pay our bills. I had several questions this past week. Some of the questions were answered by our village engineer, Profrioli, so I want to thank him and thank Tom. But there was some additional questions in there that I had asked discussions with the mayor, but I would like to, put that at some point in a work session that's related to expense and things of village officials of that nature. So maybe we can go into the details on some of the stuff into that work session at that time.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Letter D, resolution authorizing the village manager to sign a license agreement with Douglas Tertian and Rochelle Tertian, the owners of 8 Liberty Street, whereas Douglas Tertian and Rochelle Tertian owners are the owners of property in the village of Ossining having street address of 8 Liberty Street with a tax map designation of 97.15-1-48 property, adjacent to which is a portion of the right-of-way owned and held for the benefit of the public by the village of Ossining, the licensed premises. And whereas the owners propose to remove the existing concrete stairs at the front entry of the premises and construct a new wood frame period appropriate from front foot stoop with stair. And whereas the owners appeared before the Village of Ossining Historic Preservation Commission seeking a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed work, and whereas on July 1st, 2019, the HPC granted the COA on the condition that the owners enter into a license agreement with the Village of Ossining because the proposed front stoop with stairs would encroach upon the village's right-of-way. And whereas the owner seeks to enter into a license agreement with the Village of Ossining to use and maintain the licensed premises, acknowledging the village's ownership of licensed premises and the village's right to enter the licensed premises, now therefore be it resolved that upon review by the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to sign a license agreement with Douglas Turshin and Rochelle Turshin, owners of 8 Liberty Street. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Oh, the mayor left.
Oh.
And she's back.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Letter E, resolution authorizing tax certiorari payments for CVS Albany LLC 2080-02 and 03210 South Highland Avenue. Whereas certain tax certiorari proceedings were instituted against the Board of Assessors and or the assessor of the town of Ossining, the board assessment review by CVS Albany LLC 2080-02 and 03 against petitioner's property situated at 210 South Highland Avenue in the Village of Ossining and designated by Section 97.15 Block 3 Lot 13 for the 2016-17 and 18 assessment years, which proceedings were commenced in the Supreme Court of the State of New York, Westchester County, under index number 063985 2016, 0695 2017, and 265385 2018. And now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining, upon certification by the village treasurer that all of the aforesaid taxes have been paid, hereby authorizes and directs the village treasurer to make the payment of such refund of real property taxes due to CVS Albany LLC 2080-02 and 03, to Copel, Martone, and Leisman LLC as attorneys and agents for the petitioner as required by consent judgment, and be it further resolved that the village treasurer is authorized to make the aforesaid payment so the village may avoid the payment of any penalties, and be it further resolved that the village treasurer shall make a notation in the margin of the assessment rolls of the Village of Ossining that said assessments were reduced and payment of a refund of the overpayment of the real property taxes was made pursuant to said judgment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Letter F, resolution authorizing the village manager to sign a memorandum of understanding to extend an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Ossining to supply water to the unincorporated portion of the town. Whereas the Village of Ossining and the town of Ossining entered into an agreement effective January 1st, 2002 for the village to supply the unincorporated portion of the town with water, the term of the agreement being 15 years 2002 agreement, and whereas since the expiration of the 2002 agreement, the village and town have entered into extension of the 2002 agreement, the most recent extension having expired on June 30th, 2019. And whereas the village and town wish to extend the 2002 agreement until August 31st, 2019, while the parties negotiate a new agreement, now therefore be it resolved, the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees authorizes the village manager to sign a memorandum of understanding with the town to extend the 2002 agreement pursuant to the same terms as the 2002 agreement until August 31st, 2019, subject to approval by the Corporation Council. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Nay.
Letter G, municipal resolution authorizing participation in New York State Climate Smart Communities Grant and provision of local match. Whereas the Village of Ossining hereby pledges to participate in the Climate Action Planning Institute Westchester County project that will be submitted as a grant proposal to the New York State Climate Smart Communications Grant Program by Westchester County as lead applicant. And whereas the Village of Ossining hereby pledges to participate in the Climate Action Planning Leadership Program in partnership with the Hudson Valley Regional Council and ICLEI, local government, and for sustainability. And whereas the Village of Ossining certifies that it has identified and secured a minimum of $11,007 in matching funds from donated professional services from the village staff and volunteer time from the Village of Ossining Environmental Advisory Council and contribution to the Climate Action Planning Institute Westchester County project pursuant to the requirements of Environmental Conservation Law, Article 54, Title 15. The balance of the match needed to meet the New York NYSDEC CSC grant requirement of 50% for the project will be contributed by Westchester County and other participating Westchester County municipalities. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Ossining hereby authorizes the village manager, Karen DeTore, to act on its behalf for submittal of a letter of commitment for matching funds provision and participation in Westchester County's Climate Action Planning Institute, Westchester County. Application to the Consolidated Funds Funding Application. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board?
I have
Please.
a small comment on a typo on the first line. It's Village Ossining and hereby should have a space. Minor detail. The second is the 50. So Karen, just an explanation because there are a number of grants here that we're going through. We went in detail in the work session for those that follow us, but so we're pledging 11
That's
and
so-
change
so
for
we were
in-kind.
one of 8 municipalities identified for the counties applying for this grant. It's through the consolidated funding application this grant season. So we were identified as one of 8 municipalities along with the town of Ossining to participate in this program. And it's a leadership grant so that the municipalities can study, gain expertise and knowledge and influence local initiatives to mitigate climate change. The $11,000 match is an in-kind match, so it's based on expertise. It's based on staff hours and volunteer hours. So it's not, it's all in-kind based on staff and a certain amount of volunteer organizations.
I think the public it's confusing between all the.
It's
matches.
very confusing, and this grant especially is a little bit confusing. But basically, in a nutshell, it's 8 municipalities that are dedicating a certain amount of staff time and also volunteer time. So organizations like Green Ossining and Riverkeeper and other organizations we've reached out to participate in this as an opportunity to really get to study the impact of climate change more specifically, and also develop regional and local interventions. So it's a relatively small amount. It's a commitment, but it's not a huge lift either. So.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Fire Department removal, Ossining Fire Department. Resolved that upon recommendation of the Fire Chief, the Board of Trustees hereby approves the name of Michael Lysenko from the active roles of the Ossining Volunteer Fire Department Independent Host Company number 6. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Fire Department removal, Ossining Fire Department. Resolved that upon recommendation of the Fire Chief, the Board of Trustees hereby removes the name of Chris Oliveira from the active roles of the Ossining Volunteer Fire Department Cataract Host Company number 2. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's on the board. Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining authorizing submission of application of New York Main Street grant for stabilization of 200 Main Street building. Whereas the village desires to complete an environmental remediation of the historic bank for savings building at 200 Main Street in order to remove an obstacle to the building's redevelopment and adaptive reuse. And whereas the New York Main Street program offered by New York State Homes and Community Renewal has been identified as appropriate to fund the stabilization project. And whereas the cost estimates have been obtained for the project in the amount of $617,574 and administrative expense will total $5,500. The New York Main Street Downtown Stabilization Project requires a match of 25% of total eligible project costs. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village manager to file an application for a New York Main Street Downtown Stabilization Project grant in the amount not to exceed $467,300, and upon the funding of the said amount commits to provide $155,774 in matching funds. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Comments on the board? I just have a question. The number that we're using, obviously, I assume the CFA grant, you need to be specific. And so we're using the number that was the estimate that we received.
We,
Last
yes,
year?
it was, we spoke to the contractor and we revised the estimate. I don't know if is exactly the same because there was a slight change in the scope, I believe.
Okay.
So, but we did have to re-estimate and provide an estimate to get to that number.
I'm just curious if we are granted CFA for this project, and if by chance it goes over, and let's say instead of 617, it's 700, you'll get a 25-25 split of the over.
The way the grants typically work is that you get the granted amount, and
It says
if
not to
goes-
exceed, so I was just hoping that might be.
Yeah, no, you'll get the granted amount, and if it goes over, we'll match it beyond 25%. So.
Understood. Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Letter K, resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining authorizing submission of the application for Empire State Development Funds for Parking Study. Whereas the village recognizes the need for innovation, policy, and infrastructure improvements to ensure adequate parking and mobility options to support the continued revitalization of the commercial sector as well as projected tourism growth. And whereas the Strategic Planning and Feasibility Studies program offered by Empire State Development's Urban and Community Development Program has been identified as appropriate to fund a parking study of the village's commercial zone and waterfront. And whereas the Strategic Planning and Feasibility Studies program requires a match of 50% of total project cost. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village manager to file an application for a parking feasibility and planning study grant in an amount not to exceed $60,000, and upon the funding of said amount commits to provide $60,000 in matching funds. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board?
So we are committing up to $60,000 for our parking study, which would be a total of $120,000.
We got it.
As we discussed last week, this is a very comprehensive study of our current surface lots, the waterfront lots, and the idea is to really be able to go beyond just looking at parking, but really look at innovation. Also linking to other things like mobility, whether it's e-bikes or jitneys or whatever that can be used in conjunction with a parking plan, so that we can really mitigate the use of cars and maximize maximize our parking capacity, but also really look towards the way people will be living in the future. So it's a fairly intense study, and it's not one that we've done. It goes beyond what we've done previously in the village.
Well, we've been saying for years that we were going to do a parking plan or study, and we, I believe, had $60,000 in the budget in both 2018 and 2019 to accomplish that. So it sounds like we're doing a match of 60,000. This would be much more in-depth and comprehensive than we ever envisioned. Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Continuing business of the board.
I do. I guess this is an appropriate time for me to formally announce the members of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee so that they can be in the minutes. That makes sense? All right. Well, I want to say thank you very much to everyone who has already shown up to our public meeting that we had last month at the library. The many people who have applied to serve on the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. This is the first group of people that are being brought together to help guide this plan. This group will determine, where do we go from here? Do we have subcommittees? What sort of community outreach do we do? Where are you going to see representatives from the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee show up to get your insights and your input and your involvement in this very important discussion about how do we plan the future of Ossining. So I would like to formally announce, so that it can be minted and I can email you the spelling of the names, Madam Clerk, that the members of the steering committee, which represent both some village staff, but mostly folks who are at large in the committee, in the community, is myself, Trustee Quantel Bazemore, Planning Board member Jeff Gasparo. It's a legal obligation that the Comprehensive Plan Committee have a representative from the Planning Board, and we're very pleased that Jeff Gasparo is taking that on. Rodolfo Moran, Rebecca Fahey, Omar Lopez, Melissa Banta, Sheila Maureen Massengale, and Paulo Torres. Thank you to everyone who's agreed to serve and has enthusiastically agreed to serve. I look forward to our first meeting happening in the next couple of weeks, and we've just today started circulating emails to find a date that works for everyone, and to start doing our homework so that we can all show up a little more informed about exactly what is in our existing comprehensive plan. That's a good start.
New business of the board?
Yes, I guess I will start off. So what I'm about to share has come, and we're revisiting the whole topic in general, mainly because of the announcements of massive planned immigration ICE raids and enforcement, and new tools to combat what the president has deemed as a priority the past 2 weeks. As you know, there have been plans. Some of them have been altered, others have been rescheduled for national, what they're calling enforcement programs, mainly of those who have a criminal conviction or particular arrest warrant. However, with that said, that has caused a lot of fear in our community, so much so that the past two weekends, not only in the village of Ossining, which, by the way, has a pretty big population of people that would be fearful of such action when it comes to the county and the state. When you look at us, how we fit in to those two pictures, many businesses, organizations, places of work have actually contemplated opening or going to work or going to school. And that's not just in Ossining, it's been throughout the whole county and state. So with that said, I had to step back. I got so many phone calls from places of worship and parents and students and walking around town, and of course, while I'm at work, just through emails and phone calls. And I had to take a step back and say, you know, I have no role in this as a trustee or as a resident. It's a federal government issue. But I really had to take a step back and say, what is the only thing, if there is one thing, that I can do, that my colleagues can do, that this board and entity can do as a village board and as the 5 members of the village board of police commissioners, and that is to stop a practice that is very well-meaning of escorting ICE when they're in our community. So today, I have no presentation, I have no policy discussion, I have no stance right now on immigration reform. Today's ask and hopefully action is just to direct our police department to stop escorting ICE when they are in our community, whether that is for raids or questioning or arrest or whatever their business may be that day or week or whenever they're here. There are many communities throughout the county and state who do not escort ICE, and they operate completely fine. This is a really good opportunity for us to fight the perception that we're working with them, because we have not been. Our police department has not been. If anything, they've gone out of their way to earn the trust and respect, and I agree. However, the perception due to this new climate is pretty dangerous and real, and it's affecting us here at home. So on today, and I'll open it up to my colleagues, the only ask that I have, and I'm being joined by Trustee Quantel Bazemore, and I spoke to Trustee Casada, and he'll speak on it, I know, after this. And I know that we'll also hear from the mayor and Deputy Mayor Levin. The only ask that I'm proposing today is that we stop the action We actually, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have an actual policy that says we have to escort ICE currently in the village. So we wouldn't be changing something that doesn't exist. We would just be stopping the practice. It's a very simple ask that I think will make a huge difference when it comes to trust, when it comes to fighting a perception that is really tearing apart how we view our municipality, our police, and our community as a whole. And this is a really good chance for all of us to be united and lead a community that really is a community of immigrants and for all. So with that being said, I'll open it up to my colleagues.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on the suggestion or proposal from our colleague?
Yes, Art and I had a conversation early today. We received an email. Is it any better? Thank you. So Omar and myself had a conversation early today. We did receive an email from him regarding this specific topic. One of the things that I like to do is I like to speak to people that know more than me when I don't know enough about a topic. And I called several people that are lawyers with immigration, people within the community. They have a different perspective in different areas of this. And there's a lot of misinformation out there in the first place from people posting on different medias, either Facebook or however they do the communication. I spoke to another trustee for the village of Portchester, a friend of mine, Luis Marino, and they actually had a conference early today with the police chief in regards to some of the misinformation that is going on in Portchester and what's happening there. So again, there's a lot of misinformation out there in how the public receives and takes that information. I think that's critical. Is a little bit more than that, and again, it's not just an ask. I think there was more into it that I believe our lawyer has some additional information through via emails early this afternoon, and I'm not sure if even the chief wants to. I know we had different conversations in the past regarding these issues, and again, I would like to hear, if possible, from the chief or from the rest of our board. I think, again, it's a misperception of a lot of things that happen out there, and how do we manage this chaos sometimes that we create with by not communicating within ourselves. So I take the point of Trustee Herrera because I'm an immigrant in this country as well. I wasn't born in this country. I came here when I was 15. And I think I have said this in the past. I remember a couple of years when I first came to this country. One of the things that my dad said to me is like, make sure you always carry a copy of your green card at that time when I was 15. So I know what the fear is of a lot of members of our community. But again, that's on a federal level. This is a local level that we are asking our police to look into it. So again, I'm not sure if our police chief is want to talk, but I would like to hear from the rest of my colleagues as well. But again, it's a deeper conversation than just having a discussion here now. So
Just to add, Luisito from the Hudson Valley Community Coalition is actually one of the key members who hosted that meeting in Portchester today. So if you want to discuss, he's also here. And I also forgot to mention Shannon from the ACLU Westchester chapter should be emailing us tomorrow about their support for this particular ask. Corolla Bracco could not be here due to a board meeting, but was supportive. And we also are still reaching out to a couple of churches. At this point, though, I kind of echo Trustee Quesada's point. This is really the time for the discussion. Because it's solely an ask and it's not a policy ask, I really see this as a no-brainer. This would remove us from having to explain actual instances and being on scene with federal immigration authorities. You know, it will also take us out of the conversation about police procedure when they get there, and how we assure that those being questioned or arrested are protected or know how to ask for help from officers when they're there. It really takes us out of that whole conversation, which we haven't really gotten into since we started. Well-intentioned to go with ICE when they arrest. Last I checked, we made a well-intentioned decision, and if my recollection is wrong, please, Mayor and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, to reach out to ICE and say that when you're coming to our community, we want a heads up. We know that you don't have to tell us, but we want a heads up because we want to make sure that our community and those being questioned or arrested are detained. So that proactive intention was very positive and very well-meaning. I don't think that it serves us as we meant for it to, and I think it's a really easy way to correct it by just not being involved with them when they come here.
Well, I'd like to hear from the chief, but are there other comments or questions that you want to share at this point?
I mean, I'd like to hear from you. I don't understand the concept of escorting, so I'm sure you'll delineate more about it in that context.
All right. I think there's a lot of misinformation needs to be cleared up. First and foremost, I think headlines are important. And when you send out a headline that says that we need to stop our police from escorting ICE, I think that's all people hear. And when we walk away from tonight, most people are not going to watch this video. Most people are not going to come back and look at it tomorrow. They're not going to hear what I say right now. But what people will see is a Facebook blurb that says, Ossining police escort ICE. And those are the words they're going to walk away with. So I'm troubled by the concept that this was the only option that was available. I work in an industry where we don't have the ability to tell people we only had one tool. No matter what the situation is, no matter what we did, we're forced to go back and look and say, what could we have done better? And in every instance, we're expected to use every tool at our disposal. In this case, there's a lot of things we could have done. First and foremost, you could have gone and said, I know that the police department doesn't do immigration enforcement. You know, because we've discussed this at public sessions, at executive sessions, at work sessions, on phone calls, and in my office. We've worked together with county legislators on these type of policies, and it has never been the policy of the Ossining Police Department to cooperate with ICE. Very clearly, this is what the Ossining Police Department does, and this is the same message I've shared time and time again. We have asked ICE that when they come to our community, that they inform us that they're here, that they're present, where they'll be going, and that when they're done, they inform us of whether or not anyone's been detained, who that person is, and what they've been detained for. There's a very good reason for this. This goes back 6 years. As a lieutenant, I received a phone call from a resident who was furious because some federal agency had appeared in front of his house, blocked his driveway, and after some discrepancy of words, told the resident that he would shoot his dog if the dog came any closer. That resident continues today to contact federal agencies trying to find out who that person was. We have no answer because we were not there. 2 years ago, we have a call of a kidnapping on State Street. Men jumped out of a minivan and kidnapped my uncle. That was an ICE operation. That's the initiation of us having the conversation with ICE as to why they're here, what they're doing, and what we need to know. Several weeks after that, there was a barricaded subject that ICE was trying to call out at a house directly across the mayor's house at school bus time. Had we known that was going on, we would have been able to inform people at that bus stop that there's a law enforcement operation going on. When we send officers with them, the instruction to our officers is to be in the area. We do not escort, we observe. Our purpose of observation is to make sure that there's not a further dangerous situation going on. We cannot stop ICE. I have never pretended, and I will never pretend, that we have the ability to stand in front of a federal agency and stop them from doing their job. That said, we do not cooperate, we do not participate. But in the event that a subject runs out of that house, a gunfight breaks out, or some other situation occurs that causes danger to the rest of this community, I have an obligation that I am sworn to protect every resident of this community. That includes people that are going to be detained by ICE. So, some things the Ossining Police Department does do, because we have other tools at our disposal. We try to stabilize the community. We help promote literacy and education, both in children and adults. This year we did Ossining Basics as well as an adult GED class that was attended by almost exclusively the Hispanic community. We help fight food insecurity through partnerships with the Ossining Union Free School District, feeding Westchester. I personally advocated, as one of the only police chiefs in New York State, for the green light bill to get driver's licenses to people regardless of immigration status, and made very clear that my purpose in doing that was to avoid the situation of people developing police records and having to impound vehicles unnecessarily for people just trying to get to work. You come to any of our events, you'll see the actions that our police department takes. It's not a Facebook headline. This is not PR. This is not a magic trick. This is real life police work where we're trying to stabilize families so that people don't get themselves into criminal situations where ICE has to come here and do those kind of things. Whether they have to or not, that's not within our power. But we're trying to do things to help families get stable so that they don't end up in these situations. Now, you wrote in an email yesterday, and I'll read this verbatim. While the chief made it clear, while I, under chief, made it clear it was the protection, safety, well-being of the community, I believe it does more harm. This is consistent with a lot of things that have been said, and my feeling is that some of the trustees that sit on this board would prefer to go and cause controversy instead of saying, we know the good things that the police department's doing. Instead of saying, hey, to the Hispanic community, here's all the things we've done to help people, and here's what we're doing, and here's the reason that I'm willing to risk my reputation and career to stand here under a headline that says Ossining Police Escorts ICE, because what I know is that I'm doing the right thing by every single person in this community by doing that. And if we're going to steal a headline to say that I escort ICE, then so be it. And if that's what my reputation goes as for the rest of my career, it's going to be with the subsection that I did what was right. So I think that before we go and tell people that what we do is well-intentioned but causes harm, I think we should tell the whole story about what the Ossining Police Department does. And this isn't personal to me. When I leave here, someone else will wear this uniform. They'll sit in this chair. The name tags are quickly changed. But the next person that sits here stands for the same thing that I do. We're here to protect the residents of Ossining, and by ignoring ICE and pretending that they don't come or not communicating with them, here's how it's going to go. Residents are going to continue to be deported. They're going to be detained by ICE. And when residents call the police department, we're going to be forced to say, I don't know. That's something that our community has never tolerated. We are obligated to have information, and people want facts. What really causes people to have trust and confidence in their community is facts and knowledge. When people know what really happened, what really occurred, and not just a story, that empowers our people the people that live here. That empowers our residents. So my intention is to continue to observe the actions of every law enforcement agency that comes into our community for the sake of keeping our community informed and making sure that people are safe.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, if I could add one procedural element. The Ossining Police Department Manual, Article 2, passed by resolution of the board, Section 2.2, Subdivision 26, orders the Chief of Police to cooperate with all law enforcement agencies and officers in matters of mutual interest. So before this can be passed, I believe that you'd have to open the articles of the manual, and there'd be a larger discussion to be had. If we're going to do that, I have many sections I'd like to change.
Okay. Thank you for bringing it back to legal policy and procedure, because I would like to get some insight and from Corporation Counsel Kahan. And I'll just say, Village Board has, a not terribly long list of very clear responsibilities. We have to pass a budget each year so that we can bills. We pass legislation. You see us voting on all sorts of resolutions each week, and we set policy for all the departments in village government. Big picture policy, not down in the weeds. Aaron manages most of the departments. The chief manages the police department, and Corporation Counsel Kahan manages the legal department, which is the smallest department, but incredibly important for keeping us all safe and in line. We have a special responsibility in an even more direct way with the police department. In the past, most boards have not taken a very active role in their role as Board of Police Commissioners, and among the many questions that have been raised by this discussion and others recently is what responsibility do we really have as in our role as Board of Trustees and Police Commissioners when it comes to setting policy in relation to the police department. So how we move forward with this is going to set a new expectation on how we move forward with our role in setting policy with the police department, because it's not something that past boards have done very actively, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be. I think at this moment, what we're talking about right now, it's critically important that we foster trust between community, whole community, and the police department. So how we move forward is very important for that, and we take our responsibility very seriously. So Corporation Counsel Khan, if you could help us understand what would be an appropriate procedure for moving forward with consideration of the questions that have been raised tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Sure. And Chief, thank you for the reference to Article 2. Members of the board, I had earlier sent you some language from a couple of the general orders, which generally one of them dealt with if requests for aid are made by other departments, both within the village, outside the village, and that's there. This is not specifically what we're talking about here. Article 1 of the manual does note under section 1.2 that the police department of the village of Ossining, Westchester County, shall be supervised by the village board consisting of the mayor and village trustees acting in the capacity as board of police commissioners. And then it goes on to the various duties and responsibilities of the police department, police chief, and those as well. There is a role for the board of police commissioners or the board of trustees as board of police commissioners to get involved with. As I mentioned earlier, there is a distinction in the procedure manual between what you would call articles that are at the beginning and the general orders that appear at the end. The articles are generally things that you folks or your predecessors have looked at, be they sexual harassment policies or things along those lines. Indeed, if you look at some of those particular articles, there actually is a notation when it was approved by the Board of Trustees or Board of Police Commissioners. General orders are more on the lines of what is simply the day-to-day procedures in terms of the operation of the department. An analogous situation would be if you have the building department and they have their procedures with regard to how does someone file for a permit. That's generally something that, the head of that department, be it building inspector, or would promulgate with the department, would probably discuss it with the village manager, but it would just go into effect. There is certainly an overarching policy role that the board as police commissioners plays. In terms of what this board thinks is an important policy to be done. Trustee Herrera is correct. There is no specific policy that deals with the issue that he has presented tonight. There have been past resolutions by this board with regard to various policies. I know that I had discussed with this board the issue of, and the chief had also the issue of detainers and when they would be honored at a civil detainer versus criminal. But in terms of actual policies, there is nothing that explicitly deals with the issue of agents from immigration and customs enforcement coming into the village and what should the village's role be. As the chief points out, the language of the quoted section in Article 2, if you were to implement the policy that you would not, let's use the term escort for the purposes of this, agents from immigration and customs enforcement, you have to amend that particular section because there you already have what is pretty much a blanket description that if those other departments are coming in and asking for assistance, you're supposed to provide that assistance. And I think what's important is to see what it is. I don't know what the discussion was in Portchester, on this particular topic in terms of what their police do or do not do. But the overarching thing is there are certainly the policies that are set by this board. Certainly, I think in conjunction with discussions with the chief and his line supervisors, are ultimately the policies have come from the board as police commissioners, but from this board. As I said, the general orders are just, that's almost like getting into the weeds type stuff. If you're looking at use of force, or what do you do if a diplomat gets injured or something like that. That's less policy than very specific actions that get taken. In a case like this, I think as I noted, there are specific. There is a general order dealing with what if you get a request for assistance from another department. There's also a general order dealing, in fact, with immigration. I believe it was from 2017, if I remember, I think it's 86 or 87, is the general order. And this board certainly has the ability to look at those particular orders and have discussions with the chief on them. On overall policy issues, before a particular policy is implemented, be it as simple as the one line, Trustee Herrera, that you suggest, or something that's somewhat more detailed, it's just something I think that, obviously you just want to vet it to make sure it's right, because if you put it into your policy book, it basically is there for a while, unless, this board or a future board decides to change it. But the long and short of it, Mayor, is this board has a role in its position as, if you want to call it Board of Police Commissioners / Board of Trustees, as it's, basically the entity that is the ultimate supervisor of the department, if you want to read it that way.
Thank you. Further comments?
Yeah, I did want to respond. So regardless of whether we want to call it, I called it a scored, he calls it observe. That's still, in my eyes, as being part of ICE functions in our village. And clearly this entire thing, regardless of me and the chief's involvement or partnership the past couple of years, whether in my new, role with the county board or here, or we just share a difference on how the approach is. And that's okay. However, I do not think that me highlighting an issue that I know and I see and I experience daily for past couple years, since this has been more of an issue in our community and in our state and nation. This is not something that I'm just bringing up or talking about. What the climate is what caused it, because of all the groups that I've seen and all the homes that I visited. And just because those people don't come to our board meetings or our school functions or our Know Your Rights forums, that doesn't mean that they don't care, they don't know, or they aren't worried. We have close to 30,000 people, so I don't expect the chief or myself alone to meet and talk with every group in the village. We do try. But this is an issue here. It's not just because I'm bringing it up today because it's a national conversation and controversy. Yes, it's a controversial subject, but we do live in a municipality that has one of the highest populations of undocumented residents in the county and state of New York, in the county of Westchester and state of New York. And we do have to revisit whether on a weekly county or on a weekly, monthly or yearly basis on how we are adapting or how we are addressing the fears, the concerns, the policies, the climate, because that all affects us at all levels. And this was an opportunity that I saw as a way for us to finally tell the community that, you know what, we are with you. We talk about values all the time on this board. This is taking the police department completely aside. We as a board talk about values all the time, and priorities and morals, which I know for everyone are different. But in order for me to live those out and for me to actually continue serving and looking at the people that I talk to every day, whether it's on this street or up the street or at the church or at the community organizing meeting, that I could say I did everything possible to protect you. I did everything possible to alleviate fear in our community. Will this continue to happen in our community? Yes. Can I stop it? No. But this is just an elected official who has his views and lifelong experience through multiple levels of government, but also as a person who has given this suggestion and this is a professional in law enforcement who feels that what he has done through the observation of ICE is in the best interest for our community. That's also an option, but also a difference. And on today, I feel that residents just recently, like 2 months ago, when we had another arrest, You guys probably saw my op-ed about how we didn't go into procedure about what we even do. We did a couple of months later, but this is not new that I'm bringing this up now. That was finally cleared up at a meeting a couple of months ago about what happens when ICE comes and what they do. He even alluded to that on our meeting tonight. So that happened now, but the notion of lack of trust or ignorance of how it works, regardless of how much we try, and we're going to keep on trying to build that trust, is still there. And I do know other communities that don't do that, and they're fine. And I know that we're not every community, and that we're very unique, and and we're known for that. But I don't appreciate it being called a headline. We do a lot of headlines in this village in every department, including this board. But this is about actual lives, actual people, and not everyone feels safe, regardless of the great work that we've done for the past year and a half. And I know that's not our fault, but there is more that we can be doing. And Stuart, thank you so much for educating us on the process of what it would mean to update this. To me, I mean, this is very urgent to me. That's why I brought it up and I'm bringing it under new business. And urgency can't wait, especially with what is our current threat of actions that are going to be happening in New York and in Westchester for weeks and months to come. So again, I have to go back to all these groups and all these people and all these churches and say, yeah, we're working on it, but here's a know your rights card, and you can call us if you want. That's just not enough.
I have a question though. When you meet with all of these people, do you tell them that they can trust the Austin Police Department as residents?
Oh yeah, I usually start off with
because
that.
if we're so worried that people are so scared, an elected official going to these meetings and telling people that our local police department is not the things that you hear and see on television, they're not the things that people purport for police departments to be. These are folks that you can trust. That should be helping to alleviate some of that. We're never going to eliminate it because we can't stop the federal issue that's what we're really here to talk about. But if you're going there and telling people, you as the elected official that you say that they'll trust, that should be really helpful.
This is feedback that is coming to me. I mean, I'll invite you to all these other meetings at private homes that we can have a discussion about what events or groups you speak to or I speak to,
Sure.
but offline. But this is feedback that I've gotten for months and years. This is not even before you. So, and it's not unique to Ossining. And
I get it, but I can only deal with the problems that we have here. I can't change what departments do in other places. And what people see and what ICE does and what happens here are three different things. We have to deal with what happens here.
Right. So with that said, with the feedback that I have gotten and I have seen, and with the climate that we have, this is a action that I feel will be a real step in the right direction to regain a little bit of trust from our community and take us out of what I identify as cooperation with ICE, which is the difference that me and you share.
Okay, I think it's not surprising that this conversation is getting emotional. We're right now living in a moment in our country where we are having policies tweeted out at us. We are witnessing families being separated for weeks on end. We are seeing overcrowded cages of people who are asylum seekers. We are having threats of people, thousands of people being rounded up, tweeted out at all hours by the most powerful person in our country. These threats are not being felt by strangers in a foreign land. They're being felt very deeply and very personally by people in our community. I agree, there is an urgency for us to address how we move forward with this communication, this policy, and it's our job and our responsibility to consider if there should be a change in the policy. Often when we look at policy changes, we establish a subcommittee, people go off, they work for a few months, they come back and give status. This is not as in-depth. I believe we could, all of us, continue to have the conversations that we are having with law enforcement in our own community, perhaps other communities. I know that some folks have already reached out to Portchester. I'm sure there's some other communities or organizations that we can learn from and glean insights from. There are community organizations, there are individuals in this community, and at next week's work session, we could discuss what would a policy look like. That's our job. We have a responsibility. And we need to reflect what is best for our whole community, for every department, including law enforcement. If we can come to some consensus on what that policy should look like next week, then we would have time before the next legislative session to be able to have a draft that could be put on as a resolution for August 7th legislative session. That's a pretty ambitious timeline for something of this importance. But as has been discussed tonight, our existing policy really is not reflective of our current conditions in this country. And as the chief pointed out, whatever policy and practices are in place, they'll be in place for the next chief and for our department going forward. So pardon? And the next board forward, yes, for our community going forward. So we need to address any policy changes or updates in a responsible manner. At the very least, the next step would be coming to a work session next. That would be my recommendation.
I'll be out of town next week.
Okay.
So can you send a lieutenant, or?
Do you leave
I
tomorrow?
think this is something that I should be part of.
When are you coming back?
I'll be back Thursday.
Want to have a special meeting? Back Thursday.
On this topic?
Yeah, so while we're thinking about a special meeting, I just want to reiterate that this is truly about clarity. We have had this conversation over and over and over again. I can recall talking, when we're referencing the escort or the observation. Again, I didn't expect to go into semantics between the word escort and observance, but where does the cop stand in the process, right? Like, where is the cop? Is the cop on the sidewalk? Are they at the door? I think this is a great time for clarity about what exactly the role of the police department is with respect to ICE. Now, if we're talking about communication, you can have a phone conversation, but if we're talking about observing ICE or escorting ICE, we want to be very clear about that. This is not the first time of having the conversation. I think it's important that we become clear, because when we passed that resolution back in 2017, that still never answered what is the role of the Ossining Police Department. There was still some uncertainty. When we tried to discuss resolutions similar to Tompkins County and the Sanctuary City and all those kind of things, where they were very clear, they said that we don't engage with the enforcement of ICE. That was very clear. Now, recently, when we've had conversations about ICE and the role of our police department, the word escort, and where we literally went back and forth about does the police escort or not escort. So we want to be very clear about, what do they do if they're going to escort or not escort.
Okay.
So
I think getting into this much detail is something. Some of it could just be an education and an understanding for us to learn. Some of it sounds like we might be getting into general orders, whereas our role is in the bigger picture. But at this point, I think there's, if we're talking, is it just semantics, or is there real distinction that I think needs to be reflected in the policy? And I think we're getting.
Well, just to be, with that said, and back to your point, Margaret, I don't think it's smart for my one ask to impede any further discussion on this that clearly we need. However, my ask does still stand, and if that means having a discussion for that next week and moving forward about how that works and how to do that in the right procedure in the right way, within the parameters, and then clearly we need to have a full discussion about all this and go and much more about our understanding and moving forward and procedure in general. But the particular ask about stopping this particular, I'm going to call it now, escorting and observing, that's what is being proposed for discussion, or further discussion next week, for next steps, if any.
Let me just point out, we have a fifth Wednesday in
Won't
July.
be here.
We could not meet next week and just meet on the 31st, if that works.
I won't be here. Certiorari won't be here as well.
Yeah, I won't be here. I mean, I.
Okay,
I
well,
already
no,
made
well,
plans.
then,
Sorry, I made
obviously
plans
that's not an
already.
option.
I mean, I'm
Can we
okay
do
with a
that?
special
I'd
meeting.
like to not have additional meetings,
I know.
is what I was
I
shooting
get
for.
it. But having thought that I had that Wednesday, made plans.
I mean, I'm okay with the special meeting. I mean, if we plan it out correctly and are only discussing that and have the right information in front of us, that's fine.
Well, I mean, could we just postpone our whole meeting to the 31st, to the 25th?
Instead of Wednesday, maybe
Instead of Wednesday, can we
Thursday?
just make it Thursday?
You could change your work session to the
I,
What's the date?
I'm a big fan of 4, not 5 meetings a month.
No, you could, well, as
Hold
we've
on.
already
What would
pointed
be
out,
the
we're gonna
date?
have to have one for,
Oh, yes, okay. Okay,
Another
5,
reason.
not 6.
but,
Yeah, I'm good.
you
on
could do that.
25th.
The board could, if everyone's schedule went, you could go the 20.
Come back on Thursday, the 25th? I mean, we obviously would want to talk to you before that as well as we prepare.
I'm leaving Sunday. I'll be back Thursday morning.
Manager
You around?
arranged for Joe to join us.
I'll ask him if he could change that.
Are there any other guests? No. Rest was just staff.
No, I think,
And speaking of staff, how does that work with your schedules?
Instead of. So one-
Instead of, yes. All right, so the tentative plan is to then meet next Thursday and include this on next Thursday's work session. We will confirm that and publicly notice it
and we'll
tomorrow.
we'll change the public notice for it.
All right.
Visitor recognition, is there anyone here who wishes to address the board?
Good evening, everyone. Deborah Pangle, Cat Squad Rescue, Briarcliff. I guess I don't know. I wanted to get the following on record tonight. Cat Squad stated at previous meetings that we reject the October 3rd, 2018 tether law that the board passed. We reject any law that makes it legal to chain a dog for 12 hours with no supervision and no defined extreme temperatures, which is what the Ossining tether law states. Cat Squad also sent an email requesting amendments as follows to the board to work with you to reach some sort of decision about changing some of these. Our request was a 2-hour restriction for chaining a dog. We requested also that there be supervision, which right now does not exist in the law. We also requested for you to define the extreme temperatures based on the National Humane Society standards. Also, I'm sure you know, in May, the county passed a tether law. This particular tether law does require supervision. My understanding is that the county tether law supersedes the Ossining tether law. The question for you is, do you acknowledge the county law? And with that, will you incorporate the supervision code that Ossining currently does not have? I want to get on record that the photos taken that prove that the said chained dog in Ossining was out approximately at 8 o'clock on January 22nd, 2019 in 21-degree temperatures. This is considered extreme temperatures. I reported this documentation to Chief Sylvester, asking that a fine or a summons be given to the dog owner. Chief Sylvester's response was, no action will be taken because no law was violated. For the record, Cat Squad recognizes this decision as a violation of the current Ossining tether law. Finally, Cat Squad has requested photos and video documentation of the said chained dog. The police department has not substantiated their claims that the dog lives outside, lives inside with the family, and has submitted no acceptable proof that this claim actually exists. We are asking that you consider this because Cat Squad, for 2 years, videotaped and submitted photos confirming a dog chained in Ossining for 7 years. Never goes inside. Never gets walked. Lastly, Cat Squad wants the chains taken off the dogs of Ossining. Your silence will not protect you from accountability. Perhaps Cat Squad will need to work harder to get your attention. I promise you here tonight, we will be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bangle.
Mayor, just one thing. The Westchester County ordinance does not supersede the village ordinance. It only acts in those areas where other villages and municipalities have not acted. That's specifically provided for in the county ordinance. Why don't you just read the Westchester County ordinance? It's right in there.
I did not read that.
Okay,
Okay,
ma'am.
okay.
So we'll have to have that discussion.
That we can,
Get it.
is there someone else who would like to comment? In visitor recognition. Welcome.
Good evening. How are you doing? My name is Gabriel Wambanya, and I'm a resident here from Ossining. I just want to speak to the matter about the whole ICE and escorting. I just want to start by saying I understand the chief of police of why they need to, I don't know, what was it, inspect or just observe what ICE is doing. So I think we should take an example from Portchester, right? Portchester made it very clear what their role was with ICE. The chief of police came out. He said, "This is what we do. This is what we do," and the community just trusts now the chief of police, right? They build that relationship. I guess I think that's what Trustee Omar was really saying, right? You want to build that relationship with the community because I don't even think the undocumented community actually even knows the chief, right? He doesn't even know who he is. So if he's observing, they might think he's ICE. So why not make that clear? Hey, I'm the police chief. We're not gonna, collaborate with him, but we need to be there on the scene. And so, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Would anyone else like to comment during visitor recognition?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening to the board and to the mayor as well. My name is Vanessa Gudello, and I am the Hudson Valley Manager of Member Engagement for New York Immigration Coalition. I know that the mayor and our coalition members worked very closely as well as with the chief with support for the Green Light campaign, and we really appreciate you shepherding that from Ossining here. So thank you so much. Outside of my capacity on a full-time basis, I'm also the council member for the city of Peekskill. And I am coming here to comment also on the situation with the police escorting ICE. Just to add a little bit perspective of what we are doing in the city of Peekskill and how our police department has been handling the recent ICE activity in our community. We as a council have made it very clear to our chief, and our chief, I think, is very conscious of the fact that we do have a very big Hispanic population, and that we have a lot of community members that are extremely fearful about all the threats and attacks that we have coming down from the federal administration. Now, we all know that there is an immense amount of tension that has created between the police department and community members, especially those community members without status. And we are very much committed to displaying and demonstrating that our police department is there to protect all of our residents regardless of status. And for that reason, the council has been very clear that we do not want any collaboration from our police department with ICE, and our chief is in agreement with that. In fact, we had ICE come up to Peekskill this yesterday morning, and our police department did not call ICE, but they did. The chief did receive a call from them before they got there, letting them know that they would be in our city, that they would be enforcing administrative warrants on Divin Street, So they gave us a specific location. They did not ask for any help, nor were they given any help from our police department. And our chief was very, very clear about that. So they were given very specific information as to where they were going to be, the manner at which they were going to be enforcing, meaning that they were administrative warrants. I understand that there are certain limits in which different departments can operate, but I do think that this is a very wonderful opportunity for the board here to, again, alleviate that tension that currently exists within our community between those who have status or those who do not have status or may have shaky status and our police department, because I think we're all very in agreement that public safety is of utmost priority, right? And this is only going to increase public safety if we demonstrate that the police department is not, because it is all about perception. And if anyone on the street does see police in uniform with ICE in their uniform, it's going to send the wrong message.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Yes. And so I do think that this is a wonderful opportunity, and I hope that you will consider in making this change. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others who would like to comment during visitor recognition? Since the green light legislation was brought up, I will just reflect on that for a moment, because it is something that I was involved in my role was to reach out to other municipal leaders throughout Westchester and ask them to pass a resolution or formally make a statement that their municipality was in support of what ultimately was passed just a couple of weeks ago in Albany during their latest legislative session, which is access to driver's license for all drivers in New York State, regardless of their documentation status. And during that time, one of the first phone calls I made a couple years ago when I first became involved with that was to Chief Sylvester, and I was surprised by his immediate response, which was during his tenure as chief, during the conversations since they had first had, that his position had really evolved, and he felt that for the good of our community and for what is best for our community and for what is best for our police department is that that everyone in our community would be able to have access to a driver's license. And he came out and he made a very public statement in his letter to Governor Cuomo asking him to consider this legislation. And then when he recognized that there was some wording in the legislation that could undermine the way law enforcement was able to operate, which is an unintended consequence, he went on to talk with other leaders, and there were a handful of law enforcement leaders who took this position to try and work with the state representatives to modify that, and he did, and they did, and I'm really grateful for that. And I use that as an example. The position that all of us on the board and our police chief took was to take a position in that instance for what was best for our community. Very few other law enforcement leaders in Westchester County that took that position at all. But that was the position that was best for our community, and I'm pleased that we were all speaking with one voice, Ossining, at that time. The questions that have been raised tonight really have to do with what are the costs and benefits of our current practice in how we interact with ICE when ICE comes to Ossining. And I think that's really what we're going to be discussing next, looks like Thursday, is what are the costs and benefits of our current practices, and consider how do we want to move forward in the best interest of our community. My job as mayor, and the job of all of us in elected office, is to keep our community safe, to ensure that everyone is treated with dignity. And particularly in a moment where our country has major policy decisions that seem to be determined on social media, all that much more important that we act responsibly, have a thoughtful policy discussion, and I look forward to that happening next week, however we decide forward.
Mayor Garrity, may I just add one last question?
Of course.
May I make a request to allow public comment regarding this particular item at our meeting next Thursday?
The only reason I hesitate isn't because I don't want to hear public comment, because I really do. I want all of us to do a lot of preparation for the meeting. What we're talking about doing right now is having this as part of our work session where
I prefer not to do this. I have no desire to make one situation. We have lots of important situations. Actually, what we do here, we solve problems, we deal with issues. To me, precedence is really important. I am really not interested in breaking precedence of the public. People can come to the meetings, to turn those meetings. This was on social media today. People had an opportunity to come today. They have an opportunity 24 hours a day, and many of them take advantage. They email us their opinions directly to all of us, to each of us, from here until we meet next week with all of their opinions. They're welcome to come. I really do not want to start having a change in what legislative meetings are, what work sessions are. It opens the door to what may be important to you, maybe a dire situation a month from now for a whole other issue, and 2 months from now for yet other issues. And I'm not really in support of doing that. And I don't see a value given that in this day and age, people can contact us through many ways, 24 hours a day, with their requests, with their opinions, and are welcome to be there and are invited, as they always are, to hear what is being said. And everything gets recorded, so if they're not able to, they can follow us the next day and hear everything that we said on the record, work sessions included. So I'm personally not one member of the board.
No,
I would actually be in support of it, and I don't recall the exact meeting, but there has been instances at work sessions where we have opened it up for public comment, so it wouldn't be the first time that we've done such a thing. And two, if there is value, I just don't believe like, oh, you know, we never do it this way, so we shouldn't do it. You know what I mean? Like if it's warranted, where people feel the need to raise a question, and they're right there, I don't see the issue.
People could have come tonight and asked those questions. We only talked about a special meeting at this point in time for next week. So they could have come tonight and they can still have it. So it doesn't change. I don't recall that we've done that, but if you say that,
okay, so as the chair of the meeting, I'll say no, we're not going to have public comment. There are, as was pointed out, many, many ways that, unless there's 3 people who want it to happen, there are many ways to communicate with all of us. I'll be in my office next Tuesday from 10 to 12, but 24 hours a day, you can email us. You can call us at any reasonable hour, and we can get back in touch with you, and many of us will often meet with people in person next 8 days. And then, assuming that we have some consensus on what the parameters of a policy would be by the end of next week's meeting, there will be a public comment session before we vote on anything. Policy. There's certainly an opportunity for folks to be heard, and we hope that you'll come to us and express your concerns, your questions, your priorities, so that we can have that input to help us be well informed when we move forward.
Yeah. I'm going to agree with that, Trustee Basemore. We have had in the past people come in a work session, do comments while we do. Thank you. When we do any work session, there has been in the past comments from the public within itself. I think this topic is I don't want to say very controversial, but very important. I think there needs to be a discussion between ourselves, among ourselves and our chief. I am going to be reaching out to some of the people that I didn't get a chance to talk to today. I am meeting with some people over the weekend in regards to all the issues that I'm going to be asking for their opinion, and I ask the public or the people that are interested in being part of this discussion to email it to us or contact us in any of the regards. I mean, we are, I'm available 24/7 pretty much, so they're more welcome to contact me. You know, between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. I'm usually getting some rest, but you can always email us. I believe we all are reachable either via email or the phone numbers that are on our website. So, again, I want to thank you. I want to thank Omar for bringing some of these issues. I know he is very important in for a lot of different ways through our community. I do respect the work that our chief has done. again, misperception is a big element in nowadays with social media out there. And I think that's something that we as a board, at least I can only speak for myself, I take that very serious. There's a lot of things that go on social media, and this is just not true. Just early today, I got a phone call that my credit score was great because I was paying my credit cards on time. Guess what? I don't have a credit card. So, there's a lot of things that the perception of things are mislead to what we have nowadays with all the technology. So, again, a lot of stuff that our police department has done for our community, for our Spanish community, and again, we want to make sure that that is clarified, and welcome to different opinions, obviously, and we'll make a decision, I guess, after we get all that information that we need.
Okay. Our comments are done, then have a motion to adjourn into executive session for matters of
Matters of
personnel
personnel regarding
related-
specific persons, matters with regard to litigation, regarding a number of pending litigation matters.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for joining us. This meeting is adjourned until next week's work session, probably on Thursday.